Patrick Hicks Music Stories presents Every Grammys Ever, the 23rd Annual Grammy Awards, February 25th, 1981.
Live from Radio City Music Hall in New York City, the 23rd Annual Grammy Award Show.
Tonight is an exciting Grammys. It's the first Grammys honoring the music of the 1980s. We've got a new host tonight, Paul Simon, and for the first time in Grammy history, we have the same artist sweeping the Big Four awards. I always think it's fascinating when this happens at the Oscars. At the Oscars, this has only happened 3 times. With Frank Capra's It Happened One Night, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and Silence of the Lambs. And at the Grammys, it's only happened twice, and this is the first time. And what superstar pulled off this amazing feat? Criss Cross. No, not that Criss Cross, Christopher Cross. Christopher Cross owned the night from the first award, which was Best New Artist. He won, beating out Irene Cara of Fame, and The Pretenders. Then his song Sailing won both Song of the Year and Record of the Year, beating out Irene Cara's Fame, The Rose by Bette Midler, Lady, which was written by Lionel Richie but performed by Kenny Rogers, Woman in Love, which was written by the Bee Gees but performed by Barbra Streisand, and an old Grammys favorite is back, Frank Sinatra. Our old friend is nominated for his song New York, New York in Record of the Year and Song of the Year. But the Christopher Cross Sailing wins in both categories.
Sailing takes me away to where I've always heard it be.
A couple other interesting things about this year's Grammys. Bruce Springsteen gets his first Grammy nomination in the category Best Rock Vocal Performance Male. You had Pat Benatar getting her first win in the Best Rock Vocal Performance Female category, which she is going to go on a streak and win 4 years in a row. You have a tie in one category, which is rare but has happened a few times before, but this is the first time an artist has ever tied with themselves. It's Itzhak Perlman in the category Best Classical Performance Instrumental Soloist.
Tied with himself, do you believe that?
Then you've got Album of the Year, which has some really interesting nominations. Last year's winner, Billy Joel, is back again with the album Glass Houses. Barbra Streisand gets another nomination with the album Guilty. And Frank Sinatra gets his last ever nomination with his album Trilogy, Past, Present, and Future. And you're never going to believe this, but Pink Floyd finally get their first Grammy nominations tonight in the Album of the Year category and in the category Best Rock Performance by a Duo or Group with Vocal for their album The Wall. And then Christopher Cross is nominated for his album, Christopher Cross. And now, before we get to the winner, which again was Christopher Cross, let's talk about what wasn't nominated that also came out in 1980. You've got the Talking Heads album, Remain in Light. Their previous albums, I could see how they wouldn't get nominated, but this one not getting anything is kind of upsetting. You have the Prince album, Dirty Mind. Don't worry, Prince's time is coming. You have the debut album from U2, Boy. You have Devo with another classic, Freedom of Choice. You have Queen, who we already know are snubbed at the Grammys, but they have their album The Game. Although they do pick up a couple more nominations tonight for the song Another One Bites the Dust in Best Rock Performance by a Duo or Group with Vocal, which they lose to Bob Seger's Against the Wind. And they're nominated as producers of the album in the category Producer of the Year, Non-Classical, but they lose to Billy Joel's producer Phil Ramone. Here's one that sadly is not shocking, AC/DC's Back in Black. I think it's the 3rd best-selling album of all time. It's sold tens of millions of copies, but it's a hard rock album, so of course the Grammys ignored it. AC/DC will start to get some nominations once they add in the hard rock and metal categories, but they only have 1 win in their whole career, and it's very much past their prime. Now here's an album that is maybe the only album I can think of in history that would actually benefit from the Grammys' weird eligibility year. The Clash's magnum opus London Calling was released in the UK December 14, 1979, but wasn't released in the United States until January of 1980. So I have seen it on some lists as one of the best records of 1979. I've seen it on some lists as one of the best records of 1980. And to make things even more confusing, I've seen some people name it the best record of the entire 1970s, and other people name it the best record of the entire 1980s. So it actually would have just been simpler to have it be named Album of the Year at the Grammys that took place in 1981. But, of course, it doesn't get any nominations. The Clash will only ever get 1 nomination, which they do win, and it's for Best Long-Form Music Video at the 45th Grammy Awards. And one last album I want to talk about is Judas Priest's British Steel. Thus far at the Grammys, heavy metal has been completely ignored. There's not a single heavy metal band that's ever been nominated for anything. They've ignored early heavy metal, they've ignored the new wave of British heavy metal, but by the end of the decade, they are finally going to have to recognize this genre, and they will do it in basically the worst way possible. And the album of the year goes to...
Christopher Cross, Michael Amati, and producer!
Christopher Cross. It was maybe a bad thing for Christopher Cross that he peaked so early. He did have another successful album after this. He gets nominated for some more Grammys with his theme from the movie Arthur, but he never really has the same success again that he did with his debut album. But still, he accomplished something that thus far nobody else had been able to do, to win all 4 big awards in one night, something that wouldn't happen again for another 40 years. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time for the highs and lows of the 24th Grammy Awards in 1982.